Hi everyone. Before watching, please subscribe to our channel, give this video a like and leave a comment. This will help promote this video. Thank you and enjoy watching. The aroma of pizza dough and burned popcorn wafted through the warm leather of the recliner. On the flickering TV screen, a zombie horde lumbered towards another group of doomed survivors. I reached for another handful of popcorn, the sharp tang of singed kernels momentarily distracting me from the frantic shouts coming from the screen. "Dude, you coming for the last slice?" Robert's voice, heavy with mock disappointment, echoed from the doorway. "Almost finished with these credits," I mumbled, tossing a stray popcorn kernel at him. "Don't you dare eat the last one." Robert, my best friend since grade school, plopped down on the beanbag chair with a groan. "Rough day at the office." "Not a single deadline met," I sighed, tossing the remote onto the coffee table. "The gallery show is 2 weeks away, and I swear inspiration is currently hiding in the Bermuda Triangle." "Hey, chill," Robert said, grabbing a beer from the mini fridge. "Lewis is ordering all the grub for tonight's guys' night in. Pizza, wings, the whole shebang. You'll forget all about deadlines by the time the first round of Mario Kart starts." "Sounds divine," I admitted, finally tearing my eyes away from the TV. "Just promise you won't let Lewis win again. His smug face is starting to haunt my dreams." Robert chuckled. "No promises, but I'll definitely give him a run for his money. Now, are you sure you wouldn't rather join us? We're starting a Lord of the Rings marathon after the games." I considered it for a moment. The promise of friendship, laughter, and greasy food was tempting. But my studio was a mess of half-finished canvases and scattered paint tubes, a testament to my current artistic struggle. "Nah, you guys go without me," I decided. This episode of Zombie Mayhem actually gave me a bit of an idea. Maybe I'll get some inspiration down before you guys stumble back in smelling like victory and defeat. "All right, suit yourself," Robert said, standing up. "But if you need a break, or if the inspiration monster turns out to be more like a gremlin and throws all your paint on the floor, Lewis' door is always open." "Thanks," I said, giving him a reassuring smile. "Just lock up when you leave, would you?" "Always do," he replied, patting his pocket where his keys jingled. "See you later, buddy." With a final wave, Robert disappeared out the front door. I turned back to the TV, the final credits rolling for the zombie show. A strange sense of peace settled over me as the house grew quiet. The only sounds were the gentle hum of the refrigerator and the rhythmic patter of rain against the windows. Settling deeper into the warm recliner, I pulled out my sketchbook, the familiar scent of graphite a comfort. Maybe inspiration wasn't hiding in the Bermuda Triangle after all. Maybe, just maybe, it was waiting to be coaxed out with a steady scratch of pencil on paper. Just as I began to lose myself in the lines forming on the page, a sudden crash from the backyard ripped me from my artistic reverie. I froze, heart hammering against my ribs. The sound had been loud, a metallic clang followed by a heavy thud. Had the wind knocked something over? Maybe a branch from the old oak tree in the corner of the yard had snapped. Or maybe, panic flickered in my chest. Robert wouldn't have locked the back door, would he? He was usually too engrossed in his phone to remember mundane things like that. The thought sent a cold shiver down my spine. Taking a deep breath, I tried to convince myself it was nothing. Animals, wind, the house settling. There were a dozen logical explanations. But the uneasy feeling wouldn't subside. Pushing myself out of the recliner, I walked towards the back door on silent feet. My hand hovered over the doorknob, a sudden draft chilling the air. Maybe a quick peek wouldn't hurt. The doorknob felt cold and slick beneath my clammy fingers. I hesitated for a moment, the silence of the house amplifying the pounding of my heart. Finally, with a deep breath, I turned the knob and pushed the door open a crack. A wave of cool, damp air washed over me, carrying the scent of petrichor and something else, acrid and metallic. My breath hitched in my throat. It was the smell of blood. Peeking through the gap, I strained my eyes into the darkness. The backyard was a canvas of inky black, illuminated only by the faint glow of the streetlights filtering through the trees. Rain lashed against the patio furniture, the metallic drumming a chilling counterpoint to the frantic rhythm of my heart. There, a glint of metallic silver caught my eye, a flash amidst the shadows cast by the overflowing rain barrel. It was definitely not a branch, not an animal. My stomach lurched. Panic warred with a strange sense of morbid curiosity. I should call the police. But what would I say? There's something metallic in my backyard, and it smells like blood. It sounded ridiculous, even in my own head. Before I could make a decision, a loud crash from deeper in the yard made me jump. This time it was followed by a low guttural growl. It wasn't human, but it sent shivers down my spine. My grip tightened on the doorknob, knuckles white. I needed to get a closer look, but the thought of stepping outside into the storm, into the unknown darkness, filled me with a primal fear. "Leo," I whispered, my voice barely a squeak. Leo, my ginger tabby cat, was notorious for getting into mischief. Could he have knocked something over, gotten himself hurt somehow? The growl sent that theory flying faster than a hairball launched by a startled feline. Just as I was about to retreat back into the safety of the house, a flash of lightning illuminated the backyard. For the briefest moment, the darkness receded, revealing a dark shape sprawled beneath the oak tree. The metallic glint I'd seen earlier caught the light. It was a knife, its handle gleaming like a malevolent eye in the sudden brightness. Panic surged through me, icy and complete. This was no animal. This was something far worse. Before I could scream, before I could even think, the rain stopped as abruptly as it had begun. The sudden silence was deafening, broken only by the ragged gasps coming from somewhere in the darkness. I slammed the back door shut, the lock snapping into place with a satisfying click. Leaning against the cold wood, I slid down to the floor, gasping for breath. My heart hammered against my ribs, my body a cocktail of adrenaline and terror. What had I seen? My eyes darted around the room, searching for some kind of weapon. All I found was a fireplace poker leaning against the hearth. Not exactly Excalibur, but it would have to do until I figured out what was happening. Suddenly, a scratching sound came from the back door. A low guttural moan followed it. I scrambled to my feet, the poker clutched tight in my trembling hand. My mind raced with possibilities, none of them comforting. "Robert, is that you?" I called out, my voice shaky. Silence. Then another scratch, louder this time. The moan turned into a guttural growl that sent shivers down my spine. This definitely wasn't Robert. The scratching at the back door became a frantic pounding, the sound echoing through the empty house like a death knell. I backed away, the fireplace poker a useless weight in my clammy hand. My breath rasped in my throat, each ragged gasp a stark contrast to the growing chaos at the door. There was no mistaking the intent behind the assault. Whatever was out there, it wanted in. Panic threatened to consume me, but a flicker of defiance sparked in its place. I wouldn't let it in without a fight. "Go away," I screamed, my voice hoarse and shaky. The sound surprised even me, momentarily breaking the paralyzing terror that had gripped me. The pounding ceased. A tense silence followed, broken only by the erratic thump of my own heart. I strained my ears, trying to decipher any sound from the other side of the door. Then, a voice spoke. It was raspy, distorted, barely human. It spoke words I didn't understand, guttural sounds that sent chills skittering down my spine. Fear threatened to drown me, but a surge of determination kept me rooted to the spot. This thing, whatever it was, wasn't going to intimidate me into submission. I wouldn't let it. I said, "Leave me alone." I yelled again, my voice gaining strength with each word. Another inhuman screech filled the night, a sound that sent shivers down my spine and made me want to curl up in a ball and hide. But instead, I squared my shoulders, gripping the poker tighter. This wasn't a monster movie. This was real, and I was the only line of defense between it and the fragile safety of my home. The scratching started again, more frantic this time, desperate. It was joined by a sickening thud, the sound of something heavy being thrown against the door. The wood groaned in protest, the lock screaming under the assault. Tears welled up in my eyes, blurring my vision. I wouldn't hold out much longer. But where else could I go? The front door was locked, and all the windows were bolted shut thanks to a string of recent break-ins in the neighborhood. I was trapped, a cornered animal with nowhere to run. A sudden thought jolted me. Robert, he would know what to do. Maybe he'd even come back early. Sensing something was wrong. Grasping at this lifeline, I stumbled towards the phone, the poker clattering to the floor with a metallic clang. Fumbling with the receiver, I punched in Robert's number. The dial tone felt like a lifeline thrown across a churning sea. But as the rings echoed through the house, unanswered, my hope dwindled. Voicemail. A robotic voice announced after what felt like an eternity. Leaving a frantic message, pleading for him to come home, I slammed the phone back in its cradle. A deafening crash from the back door sent me scrambling back, the sound of splintering wood filling the air. The splintering wood sent a fresh wave of terror slamming into me. The back door, battered and weakened by the relentless assault, wouldn't hold for much longer. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic drum solo keeping time with the symphony of panic playing in my head. There was a low, guttural growl from the other side, a sound that promised pain and worse. I scrambled back, tripping over the discarded poker in my haste. My eyes darted around the room, searching for anything that could help me defend myself. A glint of metal caught my eye. On the mantelpiece, nestled amongst decorative candles, was a heavy brass letter opener. It wasn't much, but it was better than nothing. Grasping it in my trembling hand, I felt a surge of desperate courage. I wouldn't go down without a fight. The crash came again, louder this time, followed by a sickening groan as the doorframe buckled under the weight of the creature's assault. Debris rained down, splintered wood and broken glass raining down on the carpet like a macabre confetti. Through the widening gap in the door, I saw a glimpse of movement. A dark, hulking shape, obscured by the night and the driving rain. It let out another guttural growl, a sound that sent shivers down my spine and made me want to scream. But I clenched my teeth, squeezing the letter opener so tight my knuckles turned white. This was it. This was the moment of truth. With a final bone-splitting crash, the door gave way. The creature surged into the room, a monstrous silhouette framed by the shattered doorway. Rain dripped from its body, glistening like 1,000 malevolent tears. My breath hitched in my throat, the air thick with a metallic tang of blood and something else, a fatal musk that spoke of something wild and untamed. For a moment, we just stared at each other, locked in a silent standoff. The creature, a hulking mass of muscle and ragged fur, seemed to be sizing me up, its eyes gleaming with a fatal intelligence. Then it lunged. Adrenaline surged through me, erasing any trace of fear. I didn't scream, didn't cry out. My only thought was survival. I dove to the side, rolling as the creature slammed into the spot where I'd been standing just a heartbeat earlier. Scrambling to my feet, I used the momentum to launch myself at the creature's back, my makeshift weapon held high. The brass letter opener connected with a sickening thud, its point finding purchase somewhere between its shoulder blades. The creature roared in pain, a sound that shook the very foundations of the house. It spun around, its eyes burning with a malevolent fury. But before it could retaliate, a sharp crack echoed through the room. A single bolt of lightning illuminated the scene, momentarily revealing a figure standing frozen in the doorway. It was Robert, his eyes wide with shock, a pistol dangling from his limp hand. Time seemed to warp and bend. The monstrous creature, momentarily stunned by my clumsy attack, roared again, the sound raw and primal. It whipped its head around, fetal eyes locking onto Robert. My friend stood frozen, his face a mask of shock. The gun, a relic from his grandfather's collection he rarely touched, hung limp-like in his hand. He hadn't even aimed yet. The single, deafening crack of thunder had somehow yielded a single, life-saving shot. The creature stumbled back, a guttural growl escaping its throat. A dark stain spread across its fur where my letter opener had found its mark. It glared at Robert, then at me, his eyes burning with a mix of pain and fury. "What the?" Robert finally managed to stammer, his voice barely a whisper. "Long story," I gasped, my voice hoarse from fear. "Get the door." The creature lunged, its massive form a blur of muscle and rage. Robert reacted instinctively, raising the gun and firing another shot. This time, the bullet found its mark, slamming into the creature's leg with a sickening thud. It yowled in pain, a sound that sent shivers down my spine. The creature stumbled back, momentarily off balance. It glanced at its injured leg, then back at us with a snarl. Then, with surprising agility, it bolted for the open doorway, disappearing into the storm-drenched night. Silence descended upon the room, heavy and thick. My knees buckled, and I collapsed onto the floor, the brass letter opener clattering away from my grasp. My body trembled uncontrollably, the adrenaline slowly draining away, leaving behind a bone-deep exhaustion. "Are you okay?" Robert asked, rushing to my side. His voice was shaky, his face pale. I managed a weak nod, unable to speak past a lump that had formed in my throat. He knelt next to me, pulling me into a tight embrace. For a long moment, we sat there, huddled together, the silence punctuated only by my racked breaths and the distant rumble of thunder. Finally, I pulled back, wiping the tears that had escaped from my eyes. What? What was that? My voice was a mere whisper. Robert looked away, his face grim. I don't know," he admitted. "But we need to call the police." We scrambled to our feet, the adrenaline fueling our actions. As Robert made the call, my eyes darted around the room, taking in the shattered door and the debris scattered on the floor. The house suddenly felt alien, a place violated. The image of the creature, its grotesque form illuminated by the lightning flash, burned into my mind, a horrifying reminder of the night's events. The police arrived quickly, a swarm of flashing lights and concerned faces. We recounted what had happened, our voices shaky and hesitant. They searched the house and the surrounding area, but there was no sign of the creature. As the night wore on, the police left, promising to follow up on any leads. We were left alone, shaken and bewildered, the echoes of the creature's roar still ringing in our ears. The night had started with a quiet night in, a comforting routine shattered by a horrifying encounter. Now the only routine left was the nervous check of all the locks, a constant reminder of the night. The darkness crept in, and something far worse came clawing its way out. Sleep eluded me like a phantom. The shredded remnants of the back door hung from their hinges like a gruesome curtain, a constant reminder of the previous night's terror. Every creak of the house, every gust of wind slamming against the windows, sent jolts of adrenaline through my system. Robert sat beside me on the couch, his face drawn and haggard. Unlike me, he hadn't even attempted sleep. His gaze was fixed on the flickering light of the TV, but it was clear his mind was elsewhere. "You should get some rest," I said finally, breaking the tense silence. "The police will find something, right?" "I hope so," he mumbled, his voice thick with exhaustion. "But honestly, I don't know what to make of it all." His words echoed my own feelings. What had attacked us? Some kind of wild animal? A deranged person in a costume? The whole thing seemed like a scene ripped straight from a horror movie, not something that happened in real life. "Maybe it was a hallucination," I offered, the words tasting like ashes in my mouth. The stress, the lack of sleep, but the memory of the creature's ragged fur, the metallic tang of blood in the air, was far too vivid to be dismissed as a figment of my imagination. "No," Robert said with a certainty that surprised me. "It was real. I saw it too." We sat in silence for a while longer, the weight of the shared experience hanging heavy in the air. Finally, Robert sighed deeply. "Look," he said, his voice rough, "we need to get some perspective on this. Maybe tomorrow when the daylight comes and this whole thing feels a little less insane, we can figure out what to do next." His words offered a sliver of hope. Maybe with the light of day, the terror wouldn't feel quite so overwhelming. Maybe then we could begin to piece together what had happened and, more importantly, why. With a shared look of weary resignation, we decided to try for some sleep. Robert offered to sleep on the couch, closer to the door, a makeshift guardian against the unknown. I crawled into bed, pulling the covers up to my chin, the shredded remains of the back door a constant reminder of the vulnerability of our once safe haven. Sleep, when it finally came, was fitful and plagued by nightmares. I dreamed of hulking shadows and fatal growls, waking with a gasp, heart hammering against my ribs. The morning dawned grey and drizzly, the world outside shrouded in a veil of mist. The remnants of the storm lingered, mirroring the turmoil within me. As I dragged myself out of bed, stiff and sore, a sense of dread settled in my stomach. Today we had to deal with the aftermath, with the police report, with the gaping hole in our sense of security. Robert was already in the kitchen, brewing coffee. His face was grim, the dark circles under his eyes betraying a sleepless night. "Morning," he mumbled, handing me a steaming mug. "The police are coming back in an hour." I nodded, taking a tentative sip of the coffee. The bitter taste did little to dispel the bitter aftertaste of fear. "Do you think they'll believe us?" I asked, the question hanging heavy in the air. Robert shrugged. "I don't know," he admitted. "But it's only half." He leaned back against the counter, his gaze fixed on the rain-streaked window. "This isn't over, is it?" The weight of his words settled on me like a lead blanket. No, it wasn't over. We hadn't seen the last of whatever it was that lurked in the darkness. And a terrifying question gnawed at the edges of my mind. Where had it come from? And what did it want? Two uniformed officers, a weary-looking woman with a name tag reading Officer Ramirez, and a younger, clean-cut guy named Officer Thompson, entered the house, their expressions a mix of skepticism and concern. We'd spent the morning cleaning up the debris from the shattered back door, the air still thick with a lingering scent of rain and a faint metallic tang that sent shivers down my spine. So you're saying some kind of creature attacked you? Officer Ramirez asked, her voice clipped and professional. Her eyes darted around the room, taking in the shattered wood and the hastily boarded up hole where the door used to be. That's what it looked like, I replied, my voice still shaky from the previous night's ordeal. Robert stood beside me, his jaw clenched tight. Can you describe it? Officer Thompson asked, flipping open a notepad and a pen. I closed my eyes, trying to summon a coherent picture from the nightmarish jumble of memories. It was big, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. Furry, dark, with glowing eyes. Any details? Claws, fangs? Officer Ramirez pressed, her skepticism thinly veiled. There was blood, Robert interjected, his voice gruff. It was injured, and it definitely wasn't a stray dog. Officer Ramirez raised an eyebrow, but didn't comment. She continued peppering us with questions, trying to pin down details, locations, anything that might lend credence to our story. We answered as best we could, the fragmented memories making it a frustrating exercise in piecing together a terrifying puzzle. Look, I finally said, my voice gaining strength with frustration. I know this sounds crazy, but it's the truth. We were attacked, and whatever it was, it came through that door. The officers exchanged another glance, a silent conversation passing between them. Finally, Officer Ramirez sighed, a hint of resignation in her voice. All right, she said, we'll file a report. But frankly, this sounds more like something out of a horror movie than a real police case. We understand, Robert said, his voice tight. But please, if there's anything you can do, we'll keep an eye on the neighborhood. Officer Thompson offered, a touch of sympathy in his voice. And if anything else happens, don't hesitate to call. After taking a few pictures of the damage and our statements, the officers left, leaving behind an unsettling silence. The weight of their skepticism hung heavy in the air. Do you think they believe us? I asked, staring at the boarded-up hole where the door used to be. Robert shook his head. Not really, but it doesn't matter. We know what happened, and that's all that matters. His words held a steely determination that surprised me. The terror of the previous night hadn't broken him. It had hardened him, but a flicker of doubt still lingered in his eyes, a question that mirrored my own. What now? I asked. We can't just sit here and wait for it to come back, can we? Robert looked at me, his gaze intense. No, he said, we find out what it was and we make sure it doesn't come back. A spark of defiance ignited within me. We wouldn't be victims. We would find answers, even if it meant venturing into the darkness that had brought the creature to our doorstep. The library was a haven of hushed whispers and the comforting scent of old paper. We sat hunched over a dusty tome titled Myths and Legends of the County, its leather cover worn smooth by countless hands. The librarian, a kindly woman with spectacles perched on her nose, had offered it with a knowing smile after hearing our story. Hours melted away as we delved into the book's faded pages. We sifted through tales of mischievous sprites, vengeful ghosts, and even a local legend of a headless horseman that supposedly haunted the covered bridge on the outskirts of town. But nothing quite matched the description of the creature that had invaded our home. Just as frustration began to set in, a faded illustration caught my eye. Nestled amongst tales of mischievous goblins was a sketch of a hulking, bipedal creature covered in dark fur, its eyes glowing with an eerie light. Below it, a single line of faded text. The bar guest, a harbinger of misfortune, set to stalk the night, leaving a trail of blood and terror in its wake. The bar guest, Robert repeated, his voice incredulous. You're telling me we were attacked by a creature out of a legend? The librarian, who had been discreetly observing our search, cleared her throat. Legends often have a basis in reality, distorted through time and fear, she said gently. While I can't say for certain if such a creature exists, the description certainly bears a striking resemblance to what you've described. A cold shiver ran down my spine. Maybe the police had been right. Maybe it had all been a hallucination, a shared nightmare fueled by stress and lack of sleep. But the memory of the creature's growl, the metallic tang of blood on the air, felt far too real to dismiss. What does it say about the Barghest? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. The librarian flipped the page, her finger tracing a paragraph of faded text. It speaks of a creature drawn to darkness and despair, leaving a trail of misfortune in its wake. It is said to be driven by a hunger, not for flesh, but for the very essence of fear. My blood ran cold. Fear, our terror, our helplessness. Could that have been what attracted the creature? The thought sent a new wave of unease washing over me. Is there a way to stop it? Robert asked, his voice grim. The librarian shook her head. The legend offers no solutions, only warnings. It is said that the Barghest cannot be defeated, only appeased. Appeased. I repeated the word, leaving a bitter taste in my mouth. The idea of appeasing a creature that had attacked us seemed ludicrous, bordering on cowardice. It doesn't say how, the librarian continued, but perhaps understanding its motives might be a first step. We left the library with more questions than answers. The Barghest was real, a creature of legend fueled by fear. But how did it get here? And how could we appease it, if that was even possible? The weight of the unknown pressed down on me, suffocating. But there was also a sliver of determination, a spark of defiance. We wouldn't be consumed by fear. We would fight back, not with weapons, but with knowledge. We would delve deeper into the legend, seeking answers in the dusty corners of history, hoping to find a way to banish the darkness that had crept into our lives. Rain lashed against the windows of the old Historical Society building, a melancholic soundtrack to our investigation. We sat hunched over a massive oak table, surrounded by dusty files and yellowed newspaper clippings. The air smelled of mildew and forgotten memories. This is like finding a needle in a haystack, I grumbled, pushing aside an article about a local pie-eating contest. Keep looking, Robert said, his eyes glued to a faded map of the county. There has to be something, a pattern, a connection. For days, we'd scoured the archives, combing through historical records and local folklore. The Barghest remained an enigma, a creature cloaked in myth with only a handful of sightings documented over the centuries. Frustration gnawed at me. We were running out of leads, and the boarded-up hole in my back door served as a constant reminder of the danger that lurked just beyond our threshold. Maybe the librarian was right, I said, my voice heavy with despair. Maybe there's nothing we can do. Robert looked up, his face etched with determination. No, he said, his voice firm. There has to be a reason it chose us. There has to be a way to stop it. Just then, a gust of wind rattled the windows, and a loose sheet of paper fluttered off the table, landing at my feet. I picked it up, my eyes widening in recognition. It was a faded photograph depicting a group of people gathered around a strange, obelisk-shaped monument deep within the county forest. The caption read, "Local ritual site uncovered, purpose unknown." A jolt of excitement shot through me. Could this be the connection we were searching for? "Robert, look at this," I exclaimed, shoving the photo across the table. He studied it intently, a frown creasing his forehead. The Barghest. It's said to be drawn to darkness and despair. Maybe this monument, this ritual site, maybe it has something to do with summoning it. My heart pounded with a mixture of fear and hope. Could this be the key? Could dismantling the monument, severing whatever connection it had to the creature, be the answer? "We need to find this place," I said, my voice trembling with newfound purpose. "We need to see what this monument is all about." Robert nodded, a grim smile playing on his lips. "All right," he said. "Let's go see what secrets the forest holds. But this time, we're not going in blind." We spent the next few hours poring over maps and faded photographs, piecing together the location of the ritual site. It was deep within the forest, a place shrouded in legend and whispered warnings. But fear, for the moment, was overshadowed by a desperate hope. The next morning, armed with backpacks, flashlights, and a healthy dose of trepidation, we ventured into the heart of the county forest, following a barely there trail marked on a faded map. We knew what we might find: a gateway to darkness, a beacon for the creature that had invaded our lives. But we also knew we couldn't afford to turn back. We had to face the darkness, not with weapons, but with the hope of finding a light, a way to banish the fear that had brought the Barkist to our doorstep. The forest pressed in on us, a tangled mess of gnarled branches and thick undergrowth. The air hung heavy with the scent of damp earth and decaying leaves. Sunlight barely penetrated the dense canopy, casting long, distorted shadows that danced with every gust of wind. "Are you sure we're going the right way?" I whispered, my voice barely audible over the rustle of leaves beneath our feet. Robert checked the crumpled map clutched in his hand. According to this, the clearing should be just up ahead. We pushed on, navigating the treacherous terrain with a growing sense of unease. The silence was broken only by the snap of twigs underfoot and the occasional cry of a startled bird. Every rustle of leaves, every creak of a branch, sent shivers down my spine. Finally, the trees thinned, revealing a small clearing bathed in an eerie twilight. In the center stood the monument from the photograph, a black, obelisk-shaped structure made of a smooth, polished stone unlike anything I'd ever seen. It emanated a faint, cold aura that sent goosebumps erupting on my skin. "This is it," Robert said, his voice low and reverent. We approached the monument cautiously, circling it, our eyes scanning its surface for any inscription, any clue to its purpose. The stone was featureless, its surface reflecting the distorted shapes of the surrounding trees. "There's nothing here," I said, disappointment creeping into my voice. "No symbols, no instructions, just a creepy rock." A sudden gust of wind howled through the trees, whipping the dead leaves into a frenzy. A twig snapped behind us, the sound sharp and distinct in the stillness. We whirled around, hearts pounding in our chests. But there was nothing, just the endless expanse of trees, their branches clawing at the twilight sky. "Maybe we came on a bad day," I said, trying to sound confident, even though my voice trembled. "Or maybe," Robert said, his voice tense, "we've been spotted." The air crackled with unspoken fear. The oppressive silence felt heavier than ever, broken only by the frantic thudding of our hearts. We had come seeking answers, but a dreadful premonition gnawed at the edges of my mind. We hadn't just stumbled upon a dark secret. We'd stumbled into the heart of something far more sinister. Then, from the depths of the forest, a low growl echoed, a sound that sent a jolt of terror through me. It wasn't the guttural roar we'd heard before, with a deeper, more primal sound that spoke of hunger and ancient malice. The forest floor trembled, and the shadows stretched and writhed, taking on menacing shapes. A wave of primal fear threatened to consume me, but a flicker of defiance sparked in its place. We couldn't give in to fear. We had to find a way out of here, and fast. "Run!" Robert shouted, grabbing my hand and yanking me towards the edge of the clearing. We plunged into the undergrowth, the forest a maze of darkness and tangled branches. Behind us, the growls grew louder, closer. Adrenaline surged through my veins, pushing me onward, ignoring the scratches tearing at my clothes and the pain shooting through my lungs. We didn't stop running until our lungs burned and our legs felt like they would give out. We collapsed in a heap amidst the undergrowth, gasping for breath, our ears straining for any sound of pursuit. The forest was silent, an unnatural quiet that felt more menacing than the growls that had preceded it. "Do you think?" I whispered, my voice hoarse. "We don't know." Robert cut me off, his voice grim, but the fear in his eyes mirrored my own. We had come seeking answers, but instead, we had awakened something ancient and terrible. We had found the heart of the darkness, and now, the darkness had found us. The oppressive darkness of the forest pressed in on us, punctuated only by the ragged gasps of our breaths. We huddled together amidst the undergrowth, fear a tangible presence coiling around our hearts. The silence stretched on, broken only by the occasional rustle of leaves or the snap of a twig. "Do you think it's gone?" I whispered, my voice barely above a terrified squeak. Robert shook his head, his face grim. "I don't know," he admitted. "But we can't stay here forever." He was right. The forest offered little protection, and sooner or later, the creature would find us. We had to move, even if it meant blindly stumbling through the darkness. "We need to get back to the trail," I said, pushing myself to my feet. Every muscle screamed in protest, but the fear of staying put was a far more potent motivator. Robert helped me up, his hand cold and clammy in mine. We started walking, our pace slow and cautious, our eyes scanning the darkness for any sign of movement. The forest seemed to twist and contort around us, the shadows playing cruel tricks on our already frayed nerves. "We should have listened to the librarian," I mumbled, regret gnawing at me. "We should have left well enough alone." "There's no point in dwelling on what-ifs," Robert said, his voice tight. "We have to figure out a way out of this." His words offered little comfort, but at least they kept me focused on the present, on putting one foot in front of the other. Hours blurred into what felt like an eternity. Exhaustion clawed at me, threatening to drag me under. Just as despair began to creep in, a faint glimmer of light pierced through the dense canopy ahead. Hope surged through me, a spark in the suffocating darkness. "Look," I gasped, pointing towards the light. Robert squinted, his face mirroring my relief. "The trail. We made it." With renewed energy, we pushed forward, the light growing stronger with every step. Finally, we stumbled out of the undergrowth, collapsing onto the familiar dirt path. The forest loomed behind us, a dark and menacing presence, but at least we were on the marked path, a path that hopefully led back to civilization. We sat there for a while, catching our breath, the silence a comforting change from the cacophony of fear that had filled our ears for what felt like an eternity. "What now?" I asked finally, the question hanging heavy in the air. Robert looked at me, his eyes filled with a newfound resolve. "We go back to the library," he said. "We tell the librarian everything. Maybe the legends, maybe the historical society. There has to be something else, some way to fight it." I nodded, a flicker of hope rekindled in my chest. We might not have all the answers, but we weren't giving up. We would face the darkness, not with weapons, but with knowledge, with a desperate hope of finding a way to banish the creature and the fear it had brought with it. The forest loomed behind us, a silent threat, but we had taken a step back from the darkness, and in the faint light of dawn, That felt like a victory. The familiar scent of old paper and mildew greeted us as we entered the library. The friendly librarian looked up from her desk, a smile spreading across her face. "Welcome back," she said, her smile faltering slightly as she noticed the haggard state of our clothes and the haunted look in our eyes. "Did you find what you were looking for?" We exchanged a glance, the weight of our experience hanging heavy between us. Finally, Robert cleared his throat and began to recount our encounter in the forest, the clearing, the obelisk, and the chilling sound that had sent us scrambling back into the night. The librarian listened intently, her brow furrowed in concentration. When Robert finished, a long silence stretched between us, broken only by the rhythmic tick of the grandfather clock in the corner. "The bar guest," she finally murmured, her voice laced with a hint of awe. "It seems you stumbled upon something far deeper than a mere legend." "What does that mean?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. "Is there a way to stop it?" The librarian shook her head. "The legends are vague on that point." But she trailed off, her eyes fixed on a specific section of the library stacks. With a determined glint in her eyes, she pulled out a dusty tome titled Forgotten Rituals. Blowing off a layer of dust, she flipped through the pages, her lips moving silently as she scanned the text. "There might be a chance," she finally announced, her voice filled with a cautious hope. "The book mentions an appeasement ritual, a way to offer the bar guest a sacrifice, something other than fear." A flicker of unease danced in my stomach. The idea of appeasing a creature that had attacked us sat uneasily with me. But the alternative, another night of desperate flight through the forest, was even more terrifying. "What kind of sacrifice?" Robert asked, his voice hoarse. The librarian pursed her lips. "The ritual is specific. It requires an object of great personal value, something imbued with strong emotions. Love, hope, courage." We looked at each other, the weight of her words settling in. This wasn't just about offering any trinket. It was about giving up a piece of ourselves, a tangible representation of the very things the bar guest fed upon. "There has to be another way," I said, a desperate plea escaping my lips. The librarian shook her head gently. "This may be our only chance. The ritual is dangerous, but facing the bar guest without it might be a death sentence." Silence descended upon us once more, thick with the weight of the decision before us. The library, once a haven of knowledge, now felt like a cage. The choice before us a cruel twist of fate. We had come seeking answers, but instead, we were forced to confront a horrifying truth. Sometimes, the only way to defeat the darkness was to sacrifice a part of the light within ourselves.